Naruto as a story introduces us to a ton of different characters, many of which get properly fleshed out and have the opportunity to shine in the story. However, there are also characters that don't get that time in the spotlight. They don't get to truly shine, and it leaves a lot of fans wondering what happened to this character. What was their life like? What did they contribute to the shinobi society and the grander world of Naruto? But despite all these potential unknowns, a lot of fans still love a ton of these characters that we realistically know next to nothing about. But what if we did? What if we got stories about specific Naruto characters that helped to, number one, flesh out the world even more, but number two, help to establish why these characters were so important and reinforce why they are so beloved by a lot of the fans in the Naruto fanbase? So the question would be, what characters would these be? What characters deserve to be fleshed out even more? Which characters are so beloved by the fans and would also contribute to the grander world of Naruto as a whole? Well, that's why today we're talking Naruto characters who deserve a spin-off series. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, so getting into Naruto characters who deserve a spin-off series. We will be doing this in a list. I will have 5 characters, and amongst those 5 characters, some will be individual characters, but also some of those entries will be groups of characters that will focus on one of the characters within the group, but will also help to establish and flesh out the rest of the group that they're included within. And because I couldn't narrow it down to just 5, I also have 3 honorable mentions, so stay tuned because those will be revealed right before we get to our number 1 entry. So with all that out of the way, coming in at number 5 on the list of Naruto characters who deserve a spin-off series, we have Sakumo Hatake, the White Fang of the Leaf, Kakashi's father. This is a character that we realistically know nothing about. We know he is Kakashi's father. We know that he was feared by a ton of the other villages. And while he didn't have a fleet on site order like Minato did, he did instill a ton of fear into other villages to the point where when people would see Kakashi on the battlefield, they would actually flee or they would become tremendously worried because they thought the White Fang of the Leaf had come there to absolutely murk them. And then they realized it was just a child, so it couldn't be the White Fang of the Leaf. But still, to instill that much fear into someone just because your son resembles you shows the type of shinobi that you were and the type of respect that you garnered amongst other villages. And there's even more reason to justify why Kakashi's father was so feared amongst other villages. You see, when Sakumo Hatake was alive, he was actually compared to the Legendary Sannin. However, his strength was said to be greater than all 3 of the Legendary Sannin combined, which is absolutely insane considering the 3 of them battled against Hanzo the Salamander to a near stalemate, and thus they were deemed the Legendary Sannin. So considering the fact that these shinobi, who especially in the early days of Naruto were considered the best of the best, had someone who not only equaled their might, but actually surpassed the combined forces of all 3 of them. That is absolutely absurd. However, what's even more absurd is how Sakumo tragically died. He ended up taking his own life after he was shamed by the entire village. He decided to put the safety of his team above a mission, and thus even the shinobi that he ended up saving turned on him, putting him into this deep despair that inevitably caused him to take his own life, putting Kakashi onto the path of being cold-hearted, of being so focused on the mission that friends didn't matter. But what if we got to see a little bit more of this? What if we actually got to see the mission that Sakumo Hatake went on, the choice that he had to make to save his friends or to complete the mission? And maybe we could actually see the ramifications the mission had after it failed. You see, right now, all we know is that Sakumo Hatake decided to save his friends instead of completing a mission. And as a result of this, he was shamed by the entire village, a village that prostrates itself as being the heroes, as being ones who care about their fellow shinobi. However, this very instance lies in the face of that. So what if we were to add a little bit more context to that? And that context would be the ramifications that happened after Sakumo decided to abandon the mission. Maybe it led to a lot more death. Maybe it ended up leading to them losing a very important battle. This would then justify a lot of people in the Hidden Leaf feeling a certain type of way about Sakumo Hatake. But again, it wouldn't totally vilify Sakumo Hatake in our eyes because we grew up watching Naruto, watching the Kakashi we know and love, watching Sasuke risk his life for his friend, sacrificing everything for your friend, not necessarily for the mission. So all of the viewers would still understand why Sakumo did what he did, even if we see the ramifications that it had. But adding this context would help alleviate the vilification that Konoha kind of has for vilifying Sakumo Hatake for simply doing what all of us believed he should have done, and that's putting his friends' lives and his teammates' lives above the mission. And plus, I feel like seeing him face off against the likes of Granny Chiyo and Hanzo the Salamander would be absolutely awesome. So a Sakumo Hatake spin-off anime would be absolutely peak. But speaking of absolutely peak, that brings us to our number 4 more entry on this list of Naruto characters that deserve a spin-off series, and that is the Legendary Sannin. As I mentioned before, now there are a couple of reasons that I personally think a spin-off series about these 3 legendary shinobi would be absolutely awesome, but the first of which is actually where they get their name, the Legendary Sannin. You see, we hear a lot about the legendary battle they have against Hanzo the Salamander, where they are the only 3 remaining shinobi left alive after a battle against him, and thus he deems them the Legendary Sannin, so that they are to return later to face him once they grow even stronger. However, we realistically only get to see the latter half of this battle after it has already concluded. So getting to see this battle fully fleshed out, where they truly earned their moniker of the Legendary Sannin, would be really awesome to see. However, it would also be really cool to see each of these characters be even more fleshed out and see where they learned a lot of the jutsu and a lot of the ideologies that we know today. We could see Tsunade being introduced to Lady Katsuyu. We could see Orochimaru traveling to visit the White Snake Sage and try to master Snake Sage mode, inevitably failing because his body could not keep up with the White Snake Sage's power. However, probably the most interesting thing that we could get from this is Orochimaru's attempt to become the 4th Hokage. And once this doesn't happen, him going even deeper and deeper into his nefarious activities. And we could eventually see the climactic fight between Jiraiya and Orochimaru, similar to how we did between Naruto and Sasuke. When it was discovered Orochimaru had been conducting all these evil experiments, Jiraiya went to stop him. After the 3rd Hokage failed to put an end to Orochimaru and Orochimaru was escaping, we know that Jiraiya inevitably caught up to him, and Orochimaru and Jiraiya had some type of face-off. And all we know about this is what Jiraiya tells Naruto a little bit later on, when they are talking about Naruto and Sasuke. And Jiraiya says that, like you, Naruto, I was accused of not knowing how Orochimaru felt. Because my parents weren't killed, I was not able to understand what he was truly feeling. So to see that actual conversation play out and see the battle between friends that we only know as true enemies would have been really cool and could have added a lot of context to these 2 characters when they first appear in the original Naruto story. But speaking about adding context to the original Naruto story, that brings us to our number 3 entry on this list, because coming in at number 3 on the list of Naruto characters who deserve a spin-off series, we have Tobirama. Yes, the 2nd Hokage. And I have him on here for a couple of reasons. So we know that Tobirama was involved heavily in a lot of the infrastructure in Konoha. He created things like the Chunin exams, the Shinobi Academy, and while it would be pretty cool to see all of these things being created, it would also be really cool to start this series off with something we know next to nothing about, and that's actually the death of Hashirama. You see, this series could actually begin showing us the death of Hashirama. So right off the bat, it could answer one of the most asked questions amongst Naruto fans. How did Hashirama truly die? Was it in a battle during the first Great Ninja War? Was it of some unknown chakra illness? Or was it due to him losing too much chakra after pulling off some type of epic defense like the 3rd Raikage ended up doing? All of these questions could be answered right at the beginning of this Tobirama series, setting the pace for what could be an epic story about legendary Hokage of the past. You could also see Tobirama establishing even more things within the village. You could see him establishing the Leaf Police Force. You could see him essentially forcing the Uchiha to be part of this Leaf Police Force. And we could see a little bit of the friction that might start as a result of this. We'd get to see Hiruzen and Danzo as younger shinobi, closer to when they're in their prime, being trained by Tobirama, learning from Tobirama, and eventually being on his squad to face off against the Kinkaku and Ginkaku brothers and their entire squad, inevitably having to leave Tobirama behind in order to save the entire group. So we could actually see not only the death of Hashirama, but this series could end with the death of Tobirama. And although we at least know how Tobirama died, we don't know anything about the actual battle. How many of the shinobi did Tobirama take out? Did Tobirama manage to kill Kinkaku and Ginkaku, or was he just slaughtered right away? In my opinion, probably not, considering all we know about Tobirama. However, over the course of this series, we could also learn even more about Tobirama, because we know not only did he create a lot of the infrastructure within the Leaf Village, he also created a ton of jutsu that we see used later on. The Flying Raijin Jutsu, the Reanimation Jutsu. These are things that played huge roles within the story of Naruto as a whole, especially the Reanimation Jutsu. So seeing these things be fleshed out even more would not only add layers to the character of Tobirama and potentially Hashirama, but it would also help explain why he created each of these jutsu in the first place. We know Flying Raijin was something that he created to help counter the abilities of the Uchiha, and more specifically, their Mankagyo Sharingan. But why did he create the Reanimation Jutsu? Something that would end up leading to a lot of destruction within the Naruto world as a whole. But since we are speaking about destruction amongst the Naruto world as a whole, that brings me to our number 2 entry on this list. Because coming in at number 2 on the list of Naruto characters who deserve a spin-off series, we have the Uchiha. So for the Uchiha, obviously we are not going to do it about the entire Uchiha clan. Instead, I have 3 Uchiha in mind, and you could probably guess one of them is going to be Itachi because he is widely considered to be the most popular Uchiha, and although we have gotten a ton of his story fleshed out through the medium of the manga, the anime, and a ton of his light novels, there's also a lot more room for his story to be told. And another character that I would include in the Uchiha series would be Shisui, because Shisui is someone that we haven't gotten a ton from. A lot of Shisui's story does get told through the medium of Itachi's light novels. However, even despite this, he doesn't get fleshed out nearly enough, especially considering the fact that he is so beloved amongst fans. This series could help to show us why Shisui is such an impactful character. It could show us more of his time in the Anbu. It could show us more of his relationship with Itachi, and it could shed a little bit more light on his MS abilities, because right now we don't really know if he has 2 different MS abilities or if they are the exact same ability. We know it is the Koto Amatsukame, but what we don't know is how each of them function. We know one of them has a 10-year cooldown and one does not, and one you can be broken out of and one you seemingly cannot. However, expanding upon this would be really cool to see. However, the biggest reason that I say we should have an Uchiha series is not because of Itachi or because of Shisui. It's actually to flesh out Fugaku as a character. You see, Fugaku is a character that we know next to nothing about. We know he was the head of the Uchiha clan. We know that he was referred to as the Wicked Eye Fugaku, and some people like to compare him to Minato and like to say that he was the Shadow Hokage. However, we realistically never get any interactions between Minato and Fugaku throughout the actual canon story. But another thing we know about Fugaku is that he is confirmed to have a canonical MS. And while it's not actually confirmed in the manga, it is confirmed in the anime. And because it doesn't contradict anything in the manga, it is something that is widely considered to be canon. So seeing how he awoke his MS, seeing what that MS truly is, and seeing him deal with the friction between the Uchiha and Konoha would be absolutely awesome. You could have Fugaku be the main character of this series and have Itachi and Shisui appear as more secondary characters to help flesh out them as characters, but also to help flesh out the Uchiha as a whole. Because as we know, the Uchiha were planning a coup d'etat, which led to the inevitable slaughtering of the entire Uchiha clan. However, what a lot of people might not know is that Fugaku actually didn't want to do this. He was being pressured by a lot of the people within the Uchiha clan to undertake this coup d'etat. So throughout this series, we could see not only his MS abilities, but we could see him struggling with enacting this coup d'etat, dealing with all the Uchiha who are very unhappy because of their place within the village. We could see how he deals with not being named the 4th Hokage, with not being named the Hokage once Minato is inevitably killed. And I feel like a series like this could add so much depth to 2 beloved characters and also create a potential 3rd beloved character, because I feel like Fugaku could be a tremendously sympathetic character, because as we know, thanks to the anime and the light novels, he decided not to fight Itachi. He activated his MS when Itachi was there to slaughter them all. However, he stated to his son that he will not fight his own child, and instead, he and his wife decide to let Itachi cut them both down, and simply said to watch over Sasuke. So I feel like adding even more layers to this, and adding even more reason to love this character and agree with what this character stood for, could make his inevitable demise even more tragic. And a tragic story is one of the best parts about Naruto as a whole. But that being said, speaking about tragic stories, I also have to talk about a couple of the honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 1 for Naruto characters that deserve a spin-off series, we have Zabuza Momochi, the Demon of the Hidden Mist. Now, this is a character that we were introduced right at the beginning of Naruto, and he's inevitably killed off. And we only see him once again appear when he is reanimated later during the 4th Great Ninja War. However, even then, he doesn't last a long time. He is taken out relatively early on, so we don't get a lot from Zabuza. But even despite this, a lot of fans love him as a character. So a series specifically about him could do a lot of things. First and foremost, it could shed light on the Hidden Mist as a whole. It could show us how he inevitably slaughtered all of his classmates to graduate and become a true shinobi. It could also show him becoming a rogue shinobi. And it could also shed even more light on the 7 swordsmen of the mist, characters that we realistically don't know a ton about. They were shinobi that were said to hold enough power to take down an entire village by themselves. So getting a series that focuses on one of these members of this group would not only give us the opportunity to have Zabuza fleshed out even more, but it would also be able to show us his dynamic with the other swordsmen, and also be able to show us a little bit more detail about each of the swordsmen and about the power that they all held and why they were so feared and respected in the greater Naruto universe. But speaking of feared within the greater Naruto universe, that brings me to the second honorable mention on the list of Naruto characters who deserve a spin-off series, and that is the Uzumaki. The Uzumaki are a clan that by the time of Naruto are already wiped out. We know Kushina got sent away to the Hidden Leaf Village to become the next Jinchuriki, and the Uzumaki were wiped out shortly after that, leaving us with only Naruto, Karin, and Nagato by the events of Naruto and Naruto Shippuden. But how exactly did this legendary group of shinobi get taken out? Did all of the other great nations band together to take them all down? That's what a lot of fans theorize, that so many people feared the Fuinjutsu that they possessed to the point where they decided to just eradicate them as a whole. But that really wouldn't make sense. You see, the Uzumaki had great ties to the Hidden Leaf Village, so I find it very hard to believe that Hashirama specifically would have been okay with annihilating a very close ally. However, it does stand to reason that one or two of the other hidden villages could have banded together to take out the Uzumaki. So getting a series to flesh out not only this clan as a whole and flesh out their greater uses of Fuinjutsu, some of which we know today in the greater Naruto universe, but also showing us how they inevitably got wiped out and who actually carried this out, could add a lot more depth to the Uzumaki as a whole. However, since we are talking about adding depth as a whole, the third honorable mention on the list of Naruto characters that deserve a spin-off series is going to be very controversial, and it is Team 7. And the Team 7 I am talking about is Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura. And I know what you're saying. You're crazy. The entire story is literally named Naruto. And Sasuke and Sakura arguably have the most character development amongst anyone in all of Naruto. And yeah, you're absolutely right. However, this spin-off series would take place between the events of Naruto and Naruto Shippuden and show us a lot of the training when they went off with the Legendary Sannin. Now, Naruto in this spin-off series would have very little to do. He didn't learn a ton in his time with Jiraiya, and in my opinion, considering the fact that he has two literal stories that have him as the main character, I feel like him being fleshed out more isn't something we realistically need. However, Sasuke learning with Orochimaru would have been something awesome to see. Him learning all the different jutsu that we inevitably see him use in Naruto Shippuden. Him training to become even more cold-hearted. Him utilizing different versions of his Chidori. And him learning things like the summoning jutsu. However, probably the most interesting one would be Sakura inevitably training with Tsunade, and her beginning to learn not only medical ninjutsu, but also beginning to train and try to learn the strength of a 100 seal, something we see her utilize in the Fourth Great Ninja War. These would be things that would help add layers to not only Sasuke, but more specifically Sakura, something that, in my opinion, we desperately need, because in the Fourth Great Ninja War, she is an awesome character. However, up until that point, she doesn't get a lot of chances to shine. Outside of her battle with Granny Chiyo, she doesn't really do much in the story overall. She almost gets killed by Sasuke, and she lies to Naruto's face. However, outside of all of that, she realistically does nothing for herself. So this would be a tremendous opportunity to show us how much Sakura has grown as a character, and it could show us her actually going through that growth. But with that controversial honorable mention out of the way, that brings us to the number one entry on the list of Naruto characters who deserve a spinoff, and it is Minato Namikaze, the Yellow Flash of the Leaf. This is no surprise. He is one of the most beloved characters amongst Naruto fans, so much so that he actually got his own one-shot series, and in my opinion, we could actually get something like that adapted into an anime series. A lot of what happened in his one-shot story is something a lot of fans would love to see animated. See him going up against the 4 and 5 Tails Jinchuriki, saving Jiraiya and the rest of their team from these incredibly powerful enemies, being thrust onto the battlefield as an 11 to 14-year-old child, and being a main proponent on the battlefield. But not only that, it could also show him dealing with multiple different things, because you see, Minato is a character that was often fighting multiple battles. He was struggling to help Kushina deal with Kurama. He was struggling to learn more Fuinjutsu to help Kushina, all while being thrust onto the battlefield during the Second Great Ninja War. And considering the fact that he was literally a main proponent of that war and a main participant throughout the course of that war, it would be really cool to see him balance all of these things, and amongst all of this chaos, never crumble under the pressure. So throughout this series, we can not only learn a lot more about Minato, but we could see how he learned all these different jutsu, how he learned the Flying Raijin Jutsu, how he learned all the different Fuinjutsu from Jiraiya and Kushina. But we could also see him battle the likes of the 4th and 5th Tail Jinchuriki, inevitably causing him to want to create the jutsu that has become so iconic in Naruto, the Rasengan, something that was created for Kushina. It was created because he thought Kushina would inevitably eventually be forced to take part in the Second Great Ninja War. As a Jinchuriki, she was a great military power, and he wanted her to have some type of ability out there that could compete with the likes of a tailed beast bomb. And that's what actually gave him the idea to create the Rasengan, a jutsu that took him 3 years to perfect and master. However, we also inevitably see him having a battle against Kurama within Kushina. We see him linking a lot of his love and a lot of his chakra within her 8 trigram seal. And this leads to a battle in which we see Minato go one-on-one with all of Kurama. And in this battle, we see Minato with just a base Rasengan repel a tailed beast bomb, showing us that Minato's base Rasengan actually had the same power and same capabilities of a tailed beast bomb. And this would be an epic and awesome feat to get to see unfold on screen. It would be a beautifully animated fight. And throughout the course of this series, you could also see the relationship between Minato and Kushina blossom blossom even more. You could see the deep love and care that he truly has for Kushina, because a lot of what Minato does is to protect her. She was the first person that he truly decided to protect. It's why he tried to learn a lot of the jutsu that he inevitably learned. A lot of the Fuinjutsu that he was learning were to inevitably help Kushina, and his iconic jutsu was actually something that was created for Kushina. So seeing all of that truly flushed out even more so than just a one-shot, I think would do a lot for the greater Naruto universe. And as fans, all of us would absolutely love it. The Naruto Top 99 showed us that Minato, without a doubt, is the character that most people want to see some type of spin-off series about. So I feel like an anime series truly dedicated to fleshing out Minato even more would be incredibly popular. And a lot of fans, myself included, would absolutely love it. And I think it would thrust Minato to becoming the favorite character of a lot of fans if he isn't in that spot already. And it could also add to the tragedy of Minato's eventual fate even more, because we could see how much he struggled to actually juggle everything that was being thrust upon him. At the age of 11, he was being forced to juggle so many different things. He was being forced to juggle a ton of the weight of an entire war, all while having to protect and learn more to help protect the person that he loves most. And we could also see his relationship with Jiraiya be fleshed out even more. We could see Jiraiya truly start to believe that he is the child of prophecy. But I'm interested to hear from all of you. What character in Naruto do you think deserves a spin-off series? Do you agree with the characters I named, or did I leave a couple off the list? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.